Well, welcome back and a warm welcome to this talk. I hope you got the chance to watch the last video on the really quite encouraging news from the United States. Now, when we do the poll to see which country's done best in this pandemic in terms of management and organisation, at least for Western advanced countries, I think Denmark's going to come out on top. So I want to look at Denmark, and they're stopping or suspending the vaccination programme next month. And we're also going to make a bit more sense of what's going on in China. I think I've pretty well got it worked out now, and it's not a very satisfactory explanation, but I think we've probably got one. Anyway, let's go straight on to the situation from Denmark. So the Danish Health Authority, now a lot of their stuff is published bilingually actually, so there's like a Danish version and an English version, so that's really quite handy because the quality of the data is really very good. Population of Denmark, remember, only 6 million, 5.9 million, just around about that mark. Cases in the last 24 hours, still just under 1,500. Reinfections, of those, 128 were reinfections. So that's what, 8.5% roughly are reinfections. And this is pretty consistent with what we're seeing in the UK. I think the COVID symptom tracker data, the last time I checked, was about 7% of infections are reinfections. So, of course, if only 8% of infections, 7 or 8% of infections are reinfections, that means 93% aren't. And I think this is telling us that the natural immunity is really being quite beneficial. Well, it doesn't really tell us that. It tells us the combination of the vaccine and the natural immunity is all we can really infer from that. But it's looking encouraging. So, reinfections, yes. And remember, Denmark is well into BA2 territory. Presumably some of the subvariants now as well, and yet reinfections only 8.5%. Hospitalised at the moment 733, 13 in intensive care, 4 ventilated in the entire country, 4 deaths in the last 24 hours. Highly vaccinated population, 2 doses 89%, boosted over 18-year-olds 76%. Now, the background here is February, first country to remove all pandemic-related restrictions. And that was way back in the 1st of February. So Denmark realising very, very early on, well, we realised on this channel, but the first government to act, Denmark realising that you can't stop the spread of Omicron, especially now BA2 and its subvariants, and the vast importance of naturally acquired immunity. Not good for pharmaceutical companies' profits, but I believe good for us, who don't want to keep getting infected with nasty things. We want natural immunity, we want longevity, we want safely induced immunity. Anyway, virus was no longer considered a threat way back, and that's on the 1st of February in Denmark. So forward thinking. Dr. Tyra Krause, director of these. I'm not sure what that stands for, but it's the Danish national body that looks after these things. It's Danish, of course. Let the new wave run through the population is what she said way back in February. Just let it go. You can't stop it. Just let it run through the population, inducing immunity as it goes. With Omicron, it's impossible to stop the spread of infection, even with severe restrictions. Direct quote. Isn't it great to see a national medical leader with the sheer guts to reflect the accurate science? It's just excellent. Very, very pleased to see the courage that Tyra Krause has demonstrated there. Lots of popular news outlets, so I don't need to use any particular one. First country to suspend COVID-19 vaccine. First country to suspend COVID-19 vaccination programme, Denmark. I've just announced this. So from the 15th of May, they're no longer going to be sending out invitations for people to be vaccinated. And I feel the sooner other countries follow this lead, the better. I think Denmark's got it right. They're allowing natural infection. They're protecting those that need protected. But they're also saying, well, you know, basically we've vaccinated enough for now. For now. And of course, when Denmark starts the vaccination programme again, if they do decide to start it in autumn, well, first of all, they may decide they don't need to. If they do start it again, they'll be free to choose what vaccine they use, what strategy they use, whether there's a bespoke vaccine that they're able to use, whether they combine it with other vaccines. They'll have complete freedom of choice. And based on the track record of the Danish authorities, I suspect they're going to get it right, or as right as we can get it. So may resume the programme after summer for autumn. So query that. Danish Health Authority rationale for stopping the vaccination programme or suspending it. They're saying the virus is under control. There's already high levels of vaccination. And of course, there's been very high levels of infection and natural immunity as well. There's actually a drop, as we saw in the last video, drop in the number of new infections. Stabilising hospitalisation rates, in fact, they were going down. The chief physician, that's the chief medical officer of Denmark. Basically, that's our Anthony Fauci or Chris Whitty, the sort of boss doctor. We plan to reopen the vaccination programme in the autumn. Fair enough. They'll decide that later. This will be preceded by a thorough professional assessment of who and when to vaccinate and with which vaccine. So they could just decide to vaccinate those people with diabetes and hypertension, for example, respiratory disease and cardiovascular disease and renal disease, immunocompromised, because we know these people are at particular risk of getting severe disease. Or they could just decide to vaccinate the over 80s or whatever. Good to see that flexible approach being practiced in Denmark. Now let's go on to look at what's happening in China. Now I've got a couple of graphics here that are pretty useful for contextualization. Here's the first one. So here we see these are the people that have had 1 dose here, 2 dose here, 3 dose here. 60 to 69-year-old age group. Then we see the 70 to 79 and we see the 80 plus. And what we notice is there's not that many booster doses given with the Sinovac vaccine in the older age groups. And this could actually be fairly critical to what's going to happen in China. Let's look at a second graphic here. Now this graphic here shows that this is the relative effectiveness against severe illness and death, comparing the Sinovac vaccine here and Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine here. So we see after 1 dose, the Sinovac vaccine is not providing very good cover against severe disease and death, only sort of 20 up to about 40-50% there. The Pfizer vaccine much better. After 2 doses, the Pfizer vaccine is giving much better protection here compared to the Sinovac. But the key thing is after 3 doses, the situation actually changes. So after 3 doses, what we actually see is the Sinovac is giving near 100% protection against severe disease and death, much better than the Pfizer vaccine. So bear in mind that we've got poorish performance, intermediate performance, very high performance against death, severe disease and death with the Sinovac, but that depends on 3 doses. And as we see, very few of the at-risk population have had 3 doses. So this is the vulnerability of the people in China, that so many of the people that are most at risk have not had the 3 doses. So just a review then of China. The Dr. Han Council on Foreign Relations, so he's kind of more an independent observer on China, says this: the Chinese aren't even considering coexisting with the virus as an option right now. Now we saw yesterday that there's international flights coming in to Shanghai and Beijing on a daily basis. As long as those flights are coming in, the virus is going to fly in with those flights. So unless they're going to stop all travel in and out, it just doesn't make any sense. But that's not an option now. They're not even considering this, apparently, which is unfortunate. Dr. Lang Wei-han, head of expert panel. So this is kind of the Anthony Fauci of China, head of the expert panel. But of course, just as the same way as our chief medical officers, whether it's Anthony Fauci or Chris Whitty or Patrick Vallance, have to take note of political reality. The same is this true in China, even perhaps more so. Although ours take plenty notice of political reality, that's for sure, unfortunately. Anyway, this doctor says it's going to be a huge disaster if China relaxes restrictions. He says the zero COVID policy is an insurance policy for 1.4 billion people. Okay, well, we'll put a question mark there. Now, the background in China, if you follow Chinese news, which I do intermittently, I mean, I've got an example here. 2018, this pharmaceutical company, they violated standards in 250,000 doses of diphtheria, tetanus and whooping cough vaccine. There was the other scandal just, about 4 years ago now, roughly, about contaminated infant formula, and Chinese parents were trying to source their infant formula milk from overseas. And there's been other contamination scandals and poor manufacturing scandals relating to food, drugs and vaccines in China. So there's a big lack of trust. Now, to be fair, when the Chinese authorities rumble this, then there's extreme fines and there's been executions about this in China. But it's still a well-recognised problem. So it seems a lot of older people, particularly the older age groups, just don't have faith in the authorities. And of course, bear in mind the older age group can still remember the Cultural Revolution in China. Their distrust for authority is quite understandable. Some will even remember the famine in China, dear me. So anyway, this is based in Hong Kong data. 2 doses of Sinovac, 72% protection against severe or fatal COVID-19 for the over 60s. 3 doses, it goes over to 98%, which is what we were able to show on this graphic. So the Sinovac here doing remarkably well, better than the Pfizer vaccines, protecting against severe disease and hospitalizations. But the 3 doses are needed to give this level of protection, and it's simply not being not being taken up by the somewhat reluctant older age group. And also in China, there hasn't really been a sort of a concerted information giving campaign to try and sort of win this age group over. So the Sinovac vaccine is working really well, but you need 3 doses. That's the thing. It doesn't work. Works badly with 1 dose. Works badly with 2 doses. Works brilliantly with 3 doses. The crux of the problem. A 1-month outbreak in China could kill between 30 and 250,000 people, based on the death rates that we have seen in other parts of the world and the demographic. Professor Steve Tang, Chatham House think tank, of course, independent think tank, based in the UK. China's low death rate demonstrates clear superiority. So the official death rate in China is about 5,000, indicating that the Chinese political system is clearly superior to the American political system, where we've had best part of 1 million deaths. It's demonstrating political superiority. And this has to stay. This has to stay. For some reason, this superiority needs to be demonstrated. Now, of course, this is the way that the Chinese would view it. Clear superiority because of the low death rate. I mean, ignore the fact that the pandemic wasn't reported until it was far too late. Ignore the fact that we still don't know where the heck this virus came from, although we have our suspicions as to where this virus came from. No animal intermediate has ever been identified by the Chinese authority yet. Some believe, of course, the intermediate was a tissue culture in a laboratory. We don't have the information to prove or disprove that. We probably never will. But ignoring that. China's zero COVID policy is President Xi Jinping's policy. President Xi Jinping does not make mistakes and cannot be seen to make mistakes. So basically the president doesn't make mistakes. If the president doesn't make mistakes, that means the zero COVID policy must be correct. Therefore, 1.4 million people just need to fall in line because it's obviously correct, because the president says so, demonstrating the superiority of the Chinese system over Western systems. Now, I'm not saying the Chinese system is better or worse or indifferent than ours. I'm just pointing out the absurdity of this particular position. It cannot change unless President Xi Jinping says otherwise. And of course, in China, there is not a lot of backchat. So what I'm anticipating is this will, the attempt to carry on this zero COVID policy will be carried on. It will cause massive massive social distress. There'll be deaths. We know there's deaths already, people dying of other medical conditions that they can't get treatment for. It makes no sense at all, because every time an aeroplane arrives, it's going to come back. And even if they eradicate it from the Chinese population, which I don't think they can do, but even if they did, it's going to come back in with the next flight or the next bus or the next train. Quite bizarre, but that seems to be what it is. So two things. It's a fear of the low vaccination rates in the older age group, and the leadership cannot be seen to lose face, because the leadership's always right. So I think that partly explains it. Now, in a sense, this is good for us in Western countries, because a lot of you are worried or raised the concern that because the Chinese authorities are taking such extreme measures, is there some new hideous disease that they're trying to clamp down on that they haven't told us about yet? I think this indicates that we don't need that to explain the bizarre activities that are currently going on in China, and the suffering that is flowing from this policy. So I think that probably explains roughly where we're at. We don't need to postulate a new horrible disease. So I don't believe there's another pandemic coming at the moment from this situation. But I'm kind of curious, how is this going to end? How long is it going to go on for? How long can sheer political authoritarian might subjugate an entire population? And I guess the answer is quite a long time. Let's hope not, but there we are. That's my reading of it. Make of it what you want, and thank you for watching.